Hi guys, welcome back. So I have another mashup review video for you today, and this is as part of Black Authors Matter March, where I'm reading quite a number of books by Black authors, and there were two that I read that I thought were both very good, very different, but set during the same time period and deal with some similar themes. So I thought they were really interesting, and I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about them together. So today we're going to be talking about The Darkest Child by Delores Phillips and Girlcott by Florenz Webbe Maxwell. This book starts in 1958. This book is set in 1959. They both feature main characters who are young women of color. They're both coming-of-age novels, but they're very, very different, and they are written for different audiences. I just thought it was kind of interesting, the comparison between the two of them. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about them and tell you why I think you should probably go read both of them. All right, so first let's talk about The Darkest Child by Delores Phillips. This book is actually a bestseller that first came out in 2004. It is the only novel written by the author, passed away a couple of years ago. And this book, like I said, is a coming-of-age novel. It follows the story of 13-year-old Tangi May, who lives in Georgia during Jim Crow era. And her life is really, really rough. And I will say this book deals with some really heavy, dark issues. And I think the only way that you're really able to get through it, at least for me, is that Tangi May is amazing, and we're seeing everything through her eyes, and so I think that helps a lot. If it wasn't for that, I think it would be a very difficult book to read, but because we get this lovely, charming, funny voice that's so hopeful even in the worst of circumstances, it's a really great book, and I think this is an important book and one well worth reading. I feel like this is sort of destined to become a modern classic. Tangi May is a middle child with, I think, like 9 siblings. And through the course of the book, you come to realize that her mother is a prostitute. Her mother also deals with some serious mental illness, maybe bipolar, maybe other things. It's kind of unclear because it's not something that's ever diagnosed, but it becomes very clear that she's got some issues. Sometimes she can be wonderful, sometimes she can be very violent. Also got this weird mixture of being very religious, but also thinking people don't realize that not only is she a prostitute, but she also, as her daughters get older, pimps them out in order to make money to support their family. Heavy, yes, as I said. The thing that's interesting though is that when you first realize that that's what's happening with one of Tangi May's older sisters, as the reader, you understand that, but Tangi May doesn't understand it because she's also pretty sheltered in some ways, so she doesn't really know what sex is. She doesn't understand what's going on. I mean, even her sister, who is being forced into prostitution by her mother, barely really understands, and that becomes clear through some conversations that they have. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's dark, but you really do get a picture into what life would have been like during this time period for women of color, especially in that area, and especially in these kind of circumstances that are really challenging. The interesting thing about Tangi May is that she is very, very bright. She's super smart. She goes to school. Most of her siblings had to stop school at 12, but she continues on. Her teachers think that she's smart enough to go to college, but she has this really problematic background. Like I said, she's one of 9. They have different fathers. Many of them don't necessarily know who their father is, so their mother is really sort of the central figure in their household, but she's also very volatile. And so Tangi May kind of has to try to learn her moods and figure out, like, okay, are things going to be okay, or do I need to step on eggshells? So you get a lot with her and with her siblings, and you see character development with them, and you see how violence can create cycles of itself, but also how there's the possibility of maybe escaping it for some of them and trying to find hope. So this book continues on until Tangi May is, I think, 17 or 18, and we really see her grow into herself and come of age, and we see her go through some really terrible things, but always somehow maintain this fairly hopeful outlook on life, which is amazing. So I highly recommend this. I think it's incredibly well written. It's very gripping. I had a hard time putting it down. As heavy as the content is, you want to keep reading it. This was definitely a 5-star book. It's paced really well. The voice is very distinctive. It's really good, and I really, really recommend it, and deals with some of the issues of the day in terms of racism and segregation and the way that that impacted people's lives. So yeah, really good. Now, let's contrast this with another also very good but very different book, which I thought was super interesting because I actually read them one after another. I read this one first, and then I picked up Girlcott by Florenz Webbe Maxwell. This is a much shorter book. It's not even 200 pages long, and this is targeted, I would say, at like older middle grade to young teens. This book is set in 1959 in Bermuda, and it's really interesting because I actually had never heard anything about Bermuda during the civil rights era. I don't think most people know much about it, and so I thought it was really interesting. This book actually was just published in 2017 and won an award, second place for this award for Caribbean literature, so I thought it was interesting. And this is from an indie publisher, but I really recommend it. I think it's great, and I think especially for younger readers, this could be a really good introduction to issues of segregation at the time. Our main character, Desma, is about to turn 16 and is planning her 16th birthday, and she's gonna get to invite her friends to go see a movie at the cinema, which is like a really big deal, and she's very excited about it. But this boycott aimed at racial segregation in Bermuda happens and kind of ruins her plans for her birthday. So she's upset about it, but then for the first time she begins to understand what segregation really looks like in Bermuda and the impact that it has on her life and has on her family's life. She is a young woman of color coming of age, but it's really interesting because Bermuda had racial segregation, but it was like de facto. So a lot of times people would go and wouldn't even notice it because it wasn't as obvious. There weren't signs or anything. It just sort of happened under the surface. And apparently it's also the reason that it pretty quietly ended when there were these boycotts. So it's based on real historical events, but you see this girl coming of age and dealing with these issues, and I just thought it was really great. I thought it was very inspiring. I thought it really showed the impact that even young people can have in terms of nonviolent resistance and making their voices heard in political situations when something is wrong. So this is really good. I would very much recommend this book for younger readers. It is an interesting contrast though, because in Darkest Child, you have this girl who's got a messed up family situation, very severe racial segregation issues that she's dealing with in America, in Georgia, which was really bad. Whereas in this book, she's got a wonderful family that's supportive, they're kind of middle class, they're in Bermuda where there is segregation and there is racism, but it's you know, a little bit more under the surface. It's not as obvious. It's problematic, but it's not as obvious. And so it's interesting kind of seeing the differences in how they deal with things. She's also a very smart girl. Again, we get a girl who also does very well in school, and she loves math, and she wants to go and become an actuary, even though she knows of maybe one other black actuary during that time period. It's really good. It's really interesting. It's super short. Like I said, it's less than 200 pages, but I think this would be an awesome one to have in a school or in a library, especially if you have students. I just think it's a nice way to introduce them to some of these issues, but through, you know, a very relatable, fun character. I really liked it. There's also a little bit of a romance, you know, nothing crazy, but a little bit. It was very cute. So there you have it. 2 books that I read this month. Both of them take place in the late 1950s and deal with racism and racial segregation. Very different books, both really good, different audiences maybe. Talk to me in the comments down below and let me know what you guys thought. If you've read either of these, if you're interested in them, any thoughts you have on this, I would love to chat with you. If you like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.